That creepy face. All right, let's move on. So, unfortunately, today we are talking about animal harvest, so specifically consumptive use of animal and wildlife resources. And to me, some of the findings are a little bit sad today. Um, but basically, animal harvest has been a big thing in the news. If you haven't heard about people trophy hunting and all the backlash from it, I'd be surprised. But literally, to make money, local governments and countries will sell tickets. So people literally have permission to go hunt these really kind of, I, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but basically the trophies of the African savannah. And they'll literally kill them to have the trophy animal to bring home to stuff to show off and take pictures very happy next to the dead animal. So we're going to talk about that type of animal harvesting. We'll talk about some other ones as well, but we're going to focus today on trophy hunting and for basically for fun, which is why it's not my favorite. But any type of animal harvesting is removing an animal from the wild through killing or capturing it. Scientists do practice culling when appropriate. This is basically managing populations to help ecosystems stay healthy and also deal with human conflict. So, this could be if a wolf is attacking people or is very bold, that wolf might be usually shot and killed from the environment to prevent killing a human, for instance. Poaching is obviously a way that animals are harvested illegally, um, and illegal trade for both exotic pets or body parts. And then we have legal harvesting, which is food, capturing it for captivity or for reproductive programs if an animal is at risk, and also regulating hunting. So, when you're looking at a population and looking at what it's composed of, first of all, scientists always want to look at the ratio of male to female, the ratio of different ages, juveniles, reproducing adults, older adults, making sure that there is a healthy genetic composition within the population, and then the spatial structuring. Do they have enough land and area and resources for all of those different individuals? So there's been a lot of information lately about trophy hunting and scientists doing research to see, is trophy hunting sustainable? At what level is it? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So African lions are considered a vulnerable species according to the IUCN, trying to look at all of our different endangered and vulnerable species. The current populations are, in fact, estimated to be declining. So when you look at a lion pride, though, to understand how a population's doing, a lion pride will have an average of about 6 breeding females and about 2 to 3 adult males. The all of the those adult males will sire all the cubs born while they're living there, and if they are still living there, they are still fathering cubs. Groups of males can take over a new pride, and so like as the baby males from this family, for instance, grow up, they can go off and find another pride to take over because they're not going to mate with their siblings and mothers. um, so they'll take over a new pride, and when they do, as we saw at the beginning of the year in the documentary, they typically kill all cubs that are less than 9 months old. The older cubs are kicked out, and the younger cubs are killed because they want the females to be ready to mate and produce their own offspring. So cubs that can go off and live on their own can typically do that on their own around the age of 2. So they'll stay in the pride until then they'll go off with the coalition to try to find their own pride. So trophy hunting, when looking at trophy hunting, oftentimes people are focused on the males, and because you do have more females staying in a population than the males, scientists were trying to figure out at what rate could trophy hunting males not hurt the population of these animals. They problem though is that trophy hunting can increase the rate of male takeovers. So for instance, if there's a young group of males that have recently taken over a pride and those males are trophy hunted, then it'll be easy for another coalition of males to come in and take over, which sounds okay because they're replacing those males from their own pride, But remember, they're going to kill off all the babies and run off younger ones that aren't ready to go take over a pride themselves. They're probably going to die as well. So it basically, trophy hunting males in a pride can lead to the death of all of the male cubs 2 years and younger in that pride as well. If there's too much trophy hunting, too many takeovers, and basically too much infanticide. Because remember, all babies, males and female babies, are either killed or kicked out. And when females are kicked out, they really don't have a pride to go to. So they're not going to reach adulthood. So there was a study population, and they did a simulation based on 40 years of data they had from different lion prides in Tanzania. And they looked at 100 different replications of different numbers to try to figure out what would happen. So they looked at the age structure, the reproductive history of these different prides, the affiliations, and then the distributions of where these different prides were living. And they did 100 different runs of this simulation to try to figure out what would happen with numbers. And basically what scientists found was that if older males are killed, populations in general of the number of lions living in an area can be maintained. If they kill too many of the younger males, population size will decrease. And so the red line here is showing if they kill males that are greater than or equal to 3 years old. The orange is males that are 4 years old. You can see it dipping a little bit. The green and the blue are 5 and older males, 5 years and older. And so again, when they hunt, depending on what ages they hunt, if they hunted more animals in this red line that were greater than or equal to 3 years old, basically infanticide happened. All the they keep getting taken over because these are the young ones that are newly in a pride, and so infanticide happens again and again as those ones get taken, and it basically would cause the population to go away. Population numbers would drop if 4 years and older were hunted. And they really only maintained in healthy-ish ranges if males that were taken for trophy hunting were 5 or 6 years old or older. So a lot of different examples here, but again, this is the predicted female population over 50 years based on harvested males, because again, every time males leave and a new group comes in, they kill all the babies. And so when that's happening more and more, the female numbers were dropping as well. And so if you saw, here's the number of females happen that you would have if a lot of the red males would drop. Basically the female numbers and the ones reproducing would drop as well. And so in picture A, this is what would happen if males 3 years and older were killed, and the populations would essentially disappear in 30 years. This is what would happen if the animals that were trophy hunted were at least 4 years or older, so fewer turnovers. 5 years or older, 6 years or older, having the least impact to the number of populations, a slight dip and then a recovery period. So again, we've got these different quotas. Basically, scientists discovered that this is not a very good option. We don't want to have those younger males being taken from the population. This would be if there were 2 males of each age removed in a certain area with 60 females. If there's 2 males removed every single year, this is what would happen by the 30-year mark. This is if there's 2 males removed every single year in the 5 and 6 year range. We'd see a big difference in the animals that remained afterwards. Oh, I'm sorry. This was for animals 3 years and older. This is just a close-up of 4 years and older. This one is the 5 years and older. This one is the 6 years and older. Those are just close-ups of what we had before. So what did scientists determine? Sustainable trophy hunting of African animals is possible, but you need to target the right animals to prevent those turnovers and the infanticide happening over and over again. So what became important then is we need to know how to age animals, and we need to make sure we are getting them in the right ages. So male lions become sexually mature by about 2.5 years old. They have a full mane at 4, and naturally on their own, they can live until they're about 15. One estimation scientists and local people used to use was the spots on their nose. So here's a picture of the nose, and here it has been drawn pixelated. And what they people believed was that the noses get blacker over time. So you could look at the nose and determine age. After close studying, they realized that isn't always the most accurate way of figuring out how old a lion is. So by looking at 189 photos of 105 lions that they knew how old they were, they found that there was not actually nose color effect for age. What they did find is you can look at the nose color to figure out gender of the animals. So age has to be assessed carefully. You can't just look at one feature to know how old the animals are, and you need to manage them properly. And so scientists were looking at data that saw that only harvesting animals that were 6 years and older is harmful to the population. Um, so they decided they were going to discourage the export of lion trophies from animals that were less than 6 years old. So they started selling tags that basically said you can harvest an animal 6 years or older, but not younger than that. And they kept their numbers appropriate to try to keep those populations stable, knowing that male lions leave their pride. Not all of them have successful takeovers. If some of those animals get used as trophies, or if some successful takeovers become trophies and some of those animals that hadn't found a pride move in, population levels do actually stay fairly consistent with that practice. So now conservationists are actually thinking that even that trophy hunting might not be all that bad for populations as long as people really follow the rule. So they're looking more at making sure people are finding the right age lions than trying to stop trophy hunting, because if they do, the tendency towards illegal poaching rises. And then people are doing that so sneakily they can't make sure that they're doing it properly. So you can read this article to learn more about what's happening, and I'm sure there's even newer information out there if you're interested. Sad topic to me. I want the lions safe. Another animal that is trophy hunted and with a history of poaching as well are elephants. And if you know anything about elephants, you know they are extremely smart and sensitive beings. And they have very long reproductive cycles, which affect the ability for them to procreate and create new babies and maintain stable populations. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So elephant societies are very matriarchal. The oldest female is the one in charge, and the females are very highly related. Like the lions, females stay in their family forever. They don't leave their family group. It's normal to have many generations of siblings and cousins and females living in one area. You can tell the age of African elephants by their tusk size, because they continue to grow with their age. So typically the one with the largest tusks is the oldest female. So scientists studied 218 female elephants living in 108 family groups. And this area where they studied them was particularly important because there was a lot of killing of elephants before 1989, when they banned the selling and trading of ivory. So during this time when people were killing elephants for their ivory, it was estimated up to 75% of the population may have been killed. And of those killed, 80% of the poached skulls were from older females because they have the longer the longer ivory, which was in demand. And so in a matriarchal society, when the oldest female is sort of the leader of the group, having the older ones get killed off that way really changed the structures within these communities. And so what they found is that the family groups, after all of this hunting for ivory, were very different than in areas where there wasn't a lot of poaching and there wasn't a lot of ivory, and therefore deaths of elephants happening, and the family structures were more of a natural variety. So adult females elephants need to have other adult female elephants that are closely related to them in order for them to feel safe and secure, and to reduce stress levels. And they found that if they didn't have that, they were higher levels of stress and cortisol in their blood, and it caused lower reproductive output and fewer of them reproducing. So elephants need to be happy, stable, and stress-free to make the babies. And so the ones that were missing that traditional family structure because older ones had been killed off were having fewer babies and fewer offspring, and their groups remained smaller because of those high stress hormones. So here you can see the group size in Mikumi, where there had been all of the poaching. There were tons and tons of groups of very small numbers of elephants, 30 groups of elephants with only like 1 to 2 females in them, or 33 groups of elephants with 2-ish adult females, and so on. So lots of very small groups. What you see here is in an area where there wasn't as much poaching, we see groupings, not many, but we see groupings with 18 adult females, 16, 15, lots with some with 12, 10, lots with at least 5. So these are the more normal family numbers in a healthy society where the females weren't being killed for their ivory. And this is a frequency, very high frequencies of very small family groups. And so they saw changes in the reproduction system in these smaller systems. And what they did see was they saw higher levels of hormones that indicate stress if they didn't have other female adults living in their family with them. And yes, they tested their poop. So then, looking at that, if the number of females the other adult females lived with was disrupted, if they didn't have their normal family group they should have had, 50% of those females were not reproducing. So if they were already in a small group because the female related family members had been killed, they only had a 50% chance of reproducing. Whereas the intact families, the families that weren't impacted by the killing, 80% were reproducing and only 20 weren't. So we're seeing higher numbers of reproducing in those healthy family structures. And again, of the ones that were reproducing in that disrupted group, in the group without the family, 50% were obviously with an infant, and you don't have 100% infant survival rate, but in the intact families, they were finding about 60% of those females with babies. So much higher numbers and helping to keeping those populations growing in those healthier family settings. So this is information they were seeing 15 years after the ban on poaching. So long-term impacts happening from the stress, from the lack of relatedness and the breakdown of the family structure and the elephant community. If they have a small group size, if they're not as related, they'd have higher stress hormones, lower reproductive output. And so what they basically found was that long-term negative impacts from poaching of their older related matriarchs continue 1.5 decades, 15 years after the killing has stopped. Another thing that they looked at was the male elephants, and they found that they saw some differences in the broken families versus the intact families as well. The older bull elephants in a family unit can help control the behavior of young males. If the older males were taken as well, but they just weren't the leaders of the society, so the presence of females mattered more for reproducing females than the presence of many males. They don't need many of them to be reproducing. But what they found was if the older bull elephants were also killed when those older females were, then the younger males would basically come mature sooner because there weren't the older males around taking on that role. So they would literally go through their puberty sooner and become ability to reproduce. But when they did come into that hormonal changes sooner, they kind of went crazy in the head and they would go on killing sprees. And so in the 1980s, the young orphaned African male elephants that survived all of that killing matured early, approximately 10 years early, without the older males, and they would go on just rampages. And during a 5-year period, over 40 white rhinoceros were killed by these just rampaging hormonal male elephants. So it had negative impacts on other populations as well. When they introduced some older elephants into this park where all the killings were happening, the killings of the rhinos stopped. The hormonal changes happening in the younger bulls and that anger aggressive stage shortened with the presence of the males. And so it's important when we look at population dynamics, especially humans impacting these, that we think about the long-term impacts and the short-term impacts. Poaching can have long-lasting effects. It's obviously bad. The poaching word has that negative connotation. But scientists have also found with trophy hunting and some population management, if carefully planned, it can actually be scientifically sustainable. Still a political issue, but sustainable nonetheless. And that's what I have to say today. Hope you are doing well.